So, today we're talking about a king, but not just any king. This is the guy who took a kind of small northern kingdom and forged it into a European superpower. He's the man who completely rewrote the rulebook on warfare in the 17th century.
You know, he went by a lot of names, but this is the one that really stuck. The Lion from the North. Wow. A title like that doesn't just fall out of the sky, right? It's something you have to earn through sheer strength and an incredible force of will on the world stage.
So, the big question is, how on earth did he pull it off? How does one man single-handedly transform a kingdom, earn himself the title Father of Modern Warfare, and become such a legend that even Napoleon was studying his tactics centuries later? Well, let's dive in and find out.
All right, let's meet the man himself, Gustavus Adolphus, King of Sweden from 1611 to 1632. And get this, it was only after he died that the Swedish government officially gave him the title he's known by today, the Great.
And trust me, that title is no exaggeration. We're talking about giants like Karl von Clausewitz and Napoleon Bonaparte, some of the greatest military minds ever, and they all studied his campaigns. You see, he didn't just win battles, he fundamentally changed how battles were fought. But his story doesn't kick off with all that greatness. Nope. It starts with a kingdom on the very brink of collapse and a crown that must have felt more like a curse than a privilege.
Can you imagine? He was just 16 years old when his father died, and the throne was suddenly his. And what did he inherit? Not some peaceful, prosperous kingdom. He inherited a nation fighting for its very survival on multiple fronts.
The sheer scale of the crisis he faced is just staggering. He wasn't fighting one enemy, he was fighting three, all at the same time. The war with Denmark-Norway was a genuine threat to Sweden's existence. The Ingrian War was an opportunistic fight in the east. And the conflict with Poland? Well, that was a bitter family feud with his own cousin over the Swedish throne. What a mess.
So what does this teenage king do? Over the next decade and a half, he just handles it. He systematically dismantles every single one of these threats. He ends the Kalmar War, he secures new territory from Russia, and he forces a truce with Poland. With his home front finally secure, he could turn his attention to the great European conflict of the age, the 30 Years' War.
And this is where he really makes his mark on history. Because to jump into that massive war in Germany, he knew he needed more than just an army. He needed a totally new kind of army.
Before Gustav, you got to picture armies as these huge, slow-moving human bulldozers. They fought in massive blocks called tercios, sometimes 50 ranks deep. And artillery? It was heavy, clunky, and basically just used for sieges. His vision was completely different. He thinned out his infantry formations, which meant way more of his soldiers could fire at the same time. He introduced lighter, mobile cannons that could actually be moved during a battle. He was trading brute force for speed and flexibility. And this, right here, was the birth of modern mobility on the battlefield.
But his real masterstroke was an early version of what we now call combined arms. Instead of infantry, cavalry, and artillery all doing their own thing, he made them work together as one devastating system. The infantry would lay down a wall of musket fire, the mobile artillery would smash enemy formations, and then the cavalry could charge out, do its damage, and retreat behind the infantry to regroup. It was like a lethal, coordinated dance of death.
The ultimate test came at Breitenfeld. Facing the veteran imperial army, Gustavus unleashed his new military machine. The result was a stunning, decisive victory that sent shockwaves all across Europe. Practically overnight, the Lion of the North became the champion of the Protestant cause and the most feared commander of the entire war. But here's the thing, a revolutionary army needs a revolutionary state to support it. Gustavus's genius wasn't just limited to the battlefield. He was also building a modern nation back home. He created a system of parish registration, which might sound boring, but it was actually revolutionary. It let the government know exactly who lived where, which made collecting taxes and drafting soldiers incredibly efficient. And he used all that new money and manpower not just to fund his wars, but also to promote education, founding new schools and universities. These reforms at home were the engine that powered his military conquests. They laid the foundation for what Swedes call Stormaktstiden, the Age of Great Power, which is exactly what it sounds like, the period when Sweden became one of Europe's dominant forces. So, Gustavus had reached the absolute peak of his power. He was the master of Germany, the defender of the Protestant faith, the architect of a new empire. But a meteoric rise like his was bound to have an equally dramatic end. The scene is the Battle of Lützen. The battlefield is pure chaos, shrouded in this thick fog mixed with the smoke from thousands of muskets and cannons. And Gustavus, as always, was leading from the front, charging headfirst into the thick of it with his cavalry. In all that confusion, he got separated from his men and rode behind enemy lines. He was shot in the arm, then the back, and finally, a fatal shot to the head. His body was found hours later stripped of his fine clothes. Here's the tragic part. The Protestants actually won the battle, but in losing their king, they lost the war's guiding star. So, what is his ultimate legacy? For centuries, he was just hailed as an unmatched genius, the father of modern warfare. That was the view of guys like Napoleon. More recently, though, some historians have argued that maybe he was less of an inventor and more of a brilliant improver, a commander who perfected existing ideas rather than creating totally new ones. And that leaves us with the final question, doesn't it? Was he a military revolutionary who changed warfare forever? A pious defender of his faith against Catholic domination? Or maybe a brilliant but ruthless king bent on expanding his own empire? The truth, as is so often the case, is probably a complex mix of all three. The Lion of the North remains one of history's most fascinating and debated figures.